Come grab a note sheet, please. We are factoring quadratics today. Throw your name on here. It is currently first hour. This is part one. I didn't write that on here. But this is part one of 2 parts of factoring quadratics. So a quadratic trinomial is specifically what we are looking at today. A quadratic has a degree of 2, and a trinomial always has 3 terms. So a quadratic trinomial has a degree of 2 with 3 terms. Today we are specifically only going to be factoring quadratic trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1. So what that means is for our standard form, it's going to be x squared plus bx plus c. There's not going to be a number in front of that x squared there. On Friday, when we do part 2, there will be a number in front of that x squared. So for today, there is not a number in front of that x squared. Okay, we are going to be turning these into a factored form. So a factored form is always going to have parentheses. We are going to have 2 sets of parentheses. They are going to be x plus or minus a number, x plus or minus a number. Okay, before we start diving into the steps of factoring these, I want to do the opposite of factoring, which is I want to multiply one of these out. So if we move down to this box, we've got a 2 by 2 box. This is just like what we did in 5.4. So we are going to set this up to multiply. It's going to be x and 10 on the left here, and x and -4 on the top. And then I'm going to add in all my imaginary ones. So 1x to the first, 1x to the first. And then I can start multiplying to fill out my boxes. So 1 times 1 is 1. And then we add our exponent. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So I've got 1x squared here. I'm just going to write x squared instead of 1x squared. The top right box, I've got -4 times x, which is -4x. The bottom left box, I have 10 times x, which is going to be 10x. And then the bottom right box is going to be 10 times -4, which is going to be -40. Put your phone away, please. Put it away in a backpack or a pocket. Okay, if I were to combine like terms and write an answer, I would be able to combine this 10x and this -4x together. So I would start from my highest exponent. I would put x squared first. 10x plus -4x is going to be -6x. And then I have my -40 at the end. So, that is the opposite of what we are doing today. We are going to give you x squared minus 6x minus 40. You are going to be responsible to get it back to x plus 10 times x minus 4. So going this direction, going from here to here, what we just did, that's what we did in 5.4. Today what we're going to do is we're going to take a problem that looks like this, bring it back to look like this. That's what we're doing in 5.6. Okay. If you were here on Friday, when we were up at the boards solving those puzzles, saying, what 2 numbers multiply to this and add to this? What 2 numbers multiply to this and add to this? That was all to get ready for this. What we are doing today is going to be finding the 2 numbers that multiply to -40. So in this case, it was -4 and 10. And add together to be -6. In this case, it was -4 and 10. So that is the puzzle that we are solving every time. Okay, so moving down to our steps. Like I said, our steps are to find two numbers that multiply to the last number and they have to add together to the middle number. So they must multiply to their last, and they must add together to the middle. Once you find those two numbers, you can write them as your factored form. So x plus or minus number, x plus or minus a number. And then you can always multiply them out and double check using multiplication if you would like. Okay. We're going to go ahead and flip these over and start in on our examples. Okay. The two numbers you choose can be positive or negative. Sometimes they'll both be positive, sometimes they'll both be negative, sometimes you'll have one of each, just like when you guys were at the boards and that was happening. They still have to follow those two rules though. They have to multiply to equal the last number, and they have to add together to equal the middle number. All right, this table here is going to help you guys know what types of numbers to use, whether they're going to be positive or negative. We will come back to that table after each example to fill out a row of it. I want to go get started with the actual examples though. So we'll come fill out a row of the table after each example. So our first problem is x squared plus 5x plus 6. Let's take a note to ourselves of what we are trying to do. We are trying to multiply to the last number. So I'm going to over here write multiply to 6. And then we are trying to add together to the middle number. So I'm going to write down add to 5. Okay. In our notes today, I am going to show you those factor trees, and we're going to take lots of notes to ourselves as to what you need to do. On your assignment, you can write as much or as little of your factor tree and writing this out as you need to, okay? Some people will need to show all their work. Some people will need to show some of their work. Most people are depending on the problem. Some problems you need to show work on, some problems you don't. All right, so we're going to start by finding all the numbers that multiply to 6. I always start with 1, so that's going to be 1 and 6. And then I just go up on the left from there, so 2 and 3. So this one doesn't have many at all. Those are the only numbers that multiply to 6. Which of those numbers add together to be 5? 2 and 3. So 2 and 3 are the numbers we're going to pick. And our factored form is going to be x plus 2 times x plus 3. That is our answer. Okay, let's go fill out the first row of this table. So this first problem, our middle number was positive and our last number was positive. So if we are trying to multiply together to be a positive number, and we are trying to add together to be a positive number. So our last number that we're trying to multiply to be is positive, our middle number that we're trying to add to be is positive. The only way to get there is going to be with two numbers that are both positive. So you can fill out that first row of your table. If you are trying to add to be positive and multiply to be positive, you're picking two numbers that are both positive. Positives all around. Hey, any questions on that first one? Okay, let's move on to the next one then. So the next one, what number are we trying to multiply to be?
20.
Close? Negative 20. So pay attention if it's plus or minus. So we're trying to multiply to negative 20 here. And then this one's kind of tricky. What are we trying to add to be? Negative 1. So an imaginary negative 1 squeezed in there. So I like to write those down so I have a note to myself so I can remember what in the world I'm trying to do. Okay, so we will write our factor pairs. We are going to start by writing our factor pairs for 20, and then we'll worry about how we're going to make it negative. So factor pairs for 20 are 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 3 does not work. 3 does not go into 20 evenly. And then 4 and 5. And then you know you're done because the next one I would try would be 5. And it's already on my list on the other side. Alright, so from there, we need to figure out how to add to a negative. If we want two numbers to add together to be negative, we want what I like to call the more powerful one to be negative. So the bigger ones we want to be negative. So I'm going to make my 20, my 10, and my 5 negative. Because I can only make one negative to multiply to a negative. Okay, now which ones of those add together to be negative 1? 4 and negative 5. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. So our answer on this one is going to be x plus 4 and then x minus 5. And go ahead and just put x minus 5. Don't put x plus negative 5. That's just goofy. Alright, so now that we have one more example done, let's fill out one more row in the table. So if the number I need to add to be, my middle number is negative, and the number I need to multiply to be is negative, so negative and negative, the only way to multiply to a negative is with one positive, one negative. So I'm going to write down that I need one positive and one negative, but then I can put a note to myself. Because I need to add to be a negative, I want my bigger one to be negative. So one positive and one negative, and then I put in parentheses, my bigger one needs to be negative. Well, I just put big negative, but. Hey, we've got two more examples of the two last things that might happen, and then you guys will have about 20 minutes today to work on your assignment. Alright, our third example, we've got x squared minus 8x plus 12. What am I trying to multiply to be? 12, awesome. What am I trying to add to be? Negative 8. Okay, numbers that multiply to 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Okay, I want to multiply to be a positive. How can I multiply to be a positive? Two options. Yeah, so we've already done two positives. Now we're doing two negatives. So make everybody here negative. I'm making all of my options negative. Okay, which ones of those add together to negative 8? Negative 2 and negative 6. Awesome. So that means our answer on this one is going to be x minus 2 and x minus 6. Right, we got another row of our table we can fill out. So this is the third row of our table. We're going to write down if we want to add to be a negative, multiply to be positive. So if we want to add together to be negative, but multiply to be positive, we've got to use the other way to multiply to be positive, which is always going to be both of them being negative. Okay, last one. We've got x squared plus 5x minus 24. I am trying to multiply to my last. So what am I trying to multiply to be? Negative 24. And I am trying to add together to be my middle number. So I'm trying to add together to be 5. Multiples of just 24, and then we'll worry about the negatives, are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, trying not to run out of space, but I did, 4 and 6. Okay, I want to add to be a positive. So if I want to add to be a positive, that means I want to make my bigger ones be positive, my more powerful numbers in each pair to be positive. So that means I want to make my smaller ones negative. Hey, which of those cool pairs adds to be positive 5? Negative 3 and 8. 8 minus 3 is 5, yep. So then my final answer on this one is x minus 3 and x plus 8. Okay, we've got one more row of our table to fill out. So we are going to fill out that if we are trying to add together to be a positive number, but multiply to be a negative, we know that anytime we multiply to be a negative, it has to be one positive and one negative. So let's go ahead and put that down, one positive, one negative. But this time we want our big ones to be positive, which means the smaller ones are negative, but I don't want to write both of those things. All right, questions, concerns, emotions, thoughts right now? I know we wrote a lot of things down in our examples. You do not need anything other than your final answer. But if you are getting stuck, I would write down a note to myself of what I'm trying to multiply to, what I'm trying to add to. If you're still getting stuck, I would draw a factor tree, okay? So you can show as much or as little work as you need on these. And then one other thing, these can also be flipped and be completely correct. So if I had x minus 5 and x plus 4, that would be okay. But the minus needs to be with the 5 still, and the plus needs to be with the 4. But with multiplication, it's commutative, so a times b is the same thing as b times a. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. I was correct. We have exactly 20 minutes left. I think there's 10 problems on your assignment, maybe 12.